co-host, and I'd like to welcome all of the participants who are in the workshop webinar so far. Looks like we've got 22 with us. I am Ryan. I'm a developer advocate at Prisma, and Prisma Day is just about wrapping up day one. I gave a workshop earlier today on Next.js and Prisma, working with those things together. Now we have Jed Watson, who you may know from ThinkMill in Australia. And one of the things Jed's been working on is KeystoneJS. And I am excited for you, Jed, to show us all about Keystone. So I don't know if you have any requests as to how we roll on about this, but I was basically just gonna hand it over to you for you to do your thing. I'm happy to hang out and be a sounding board if you like, but I can also hide myself away too. Up to you.
No, it's nice to have someone to chat to.
Okay.
I might need you to help me stay awake.
I'm happy to do that. That sounds good.
It's all right. It's not that serious. It's a little bit like traveling for an overseas conference, except that I haven't left my house because we've just gone back into lockdown here in Sydney. So
that's right. Yeah, two weeks of lockdown, I think I heard.
2 weeks of lockdown. That's exactly what's happening. So I'm just furiously pushing buttons on GitHub at the moment to try and get this available to y'all. And I'll show you what I've got in store first,
sure.
And then
that sounds good.
Step you through how we do it all. Give me 1 second to press the magic button that makes this public. Here we go. So what I've done is I've got concentrate while I type in a very complex password. All right, very good. So I've got the finished state of a workshop, which I will show you through, and then we're going to step through each of the parts and put it together. I'm honestly not sure how much we're going to get through in the time we've got. We'll sort of take feedback as we go, I guess, as to whether we're going too fast or too slow, or but the idea is that the finished state is also there for anyone who wants to play along afterwards as well. So yeah, let me show you what I've been up to. I'll share my screen.
Sounds good.
Quickly. And I'm going to do one more thing, which is jump into my code base and switch databases to something new. All right. Kick these processes. So I've got 2 repos to share with you. The first, I'll throw them in the Zoom chat, is the finished result. This is the Prisma Day 2021 workshop. And send that to everyone. And the second repo, which I'm going to clone and build up again from scratch, is this one I've just created under my own profile, which is public, and I'll share that second one here. I thought since we've got quite a lot of code to get through, and I haven't had a chance to break it down into like lots of steps in a GitHub repo, I figured that if I'm making commits and anyone gets left behind, then you can just keep pulling from this if you take a clone of it as well. And that might help us all stay in sync as we go through the workshop. But first of all, a brief intro to Keystone. So Keystone's been very hard to describe over the years. I've actually been working on it as a side project, started about 7 years ago. And about a year ago, we got a lot more serious about producing it as a really world-class headless content management system. The trick is it's not really a CMS, it's more of an application backend. I've been watching the talks all day, sitting in the workshops and thinking, we automate so much of the stuff that you're showing people how to do. But unlike most frameworks, we've taken this approach of really trying not to block you into it. So what Keystone does, if you haven't heard of it before, is you give it your schema. A little bit unlike Prisma, the schema is actually defined in TypeScript. From that, we generate a whole lot of things, which I'll show you. But we give you some things in return. One of them is an admin UI. The other one is a GraphQL API. And so you can actually program both sides of this to implement whatever custom logic suits your app. And the idea is that you start with all of these things that have come out of the box. Like sort of all the CRUD mutations you'd be looking for, GraphQL API, WYSIWYG session roles, relationships, filtering, database migrations, thanks Prisma, event hooks, all these different field types. But the idea is that you'll outgrow them in your project over time. We find that we worked on a lot of large projects at ThinkMill, and you really benefit from all of this stuff in the first day, in the first week, in the first 6 months. But then when you end up 18 months into a project, you tend to have moved away from the things that were built into whatever framework you're using for the most part. So that's a philosophy that we've built into it. And what we're going to be building today, if I jump into this, I'm going to have to create a new user. So we'll start from scratch here, content-wise. When I start up with a fresh database, it's going to have done a few things, including using Prisma Migrate to set up the schema for me. And it's going to prompt me to create my first user. And I'm going to get warned about my password because it's quite literally password. There we go. So just off the bat, that's created us a user here. And now we can start entering some content in. So let's just create my first one. Blank, it'll get defaulted. I'll set that as myself, and off we go. Throw some content in. And now save those changes. So this is the first half of what I've built that we're going to go through today. There's a whole content management interface here. But the second half is this Next.js website, which will go through sort of both sides. So how to set up Keystone, how to configure that CMS user interface, and then also how to use it from a front-end Next.js app. And don't judge my design skills. I know they're not the best, but I picked up Tailwind to help me out a bit. And I've set up quite a comprehensive front-end app here that doesn't just include the content, but also signing in and signing out and creating new users. So we can go through the whole Auth journey. And I mentioned at the start, we've sort of got this positioning thing with Keystone because it really has a lot of content management features, but also if you're looking at something like Firebase to use as an application backend, or if you've been around Prisma long enough to remember GraphQL, it really hits a lot of those functionality notes as well. So this is what we're going to build up. Let's get into it. Ryan, do we get chat or questions as we go?
Yes, we have a chat window. So for those of you attending, if you'd like to ask a question, you can do so in the chat, but there's also the Q&A section you'll find in your Zoom webinar window down at the bottom. Q&A is one spot, but chat is fine too. Feel free to drop them in. I'll be monitoring both those locations for you, Jed, so feel free to roll on, and I'll maybe interrupt you if it looks like something we should address right away.
Great, thank you. All right, so I've got a brand new repo here. I'm going to open it up in VS Code. And the first thing we're going to do is add a few toys into a package JSON so we can work with them. Bear with me while I move some windows around. And So to kick it off, I'm going to throw a just running. I'm going to throw a package JSON that I prepared before in. Now this has got everything that we're going to need in it, just to save some time later on. But the key interesting packages here are this Keystone Next set. The rest of these ones, as well as a few of our dev dependencies, are actually for the front end. And I will bring up the terminal window and install all that stuff. While that's running, also preset a few scripts here. The two kind of groups, one is going to be to start the API server using Keystone. We're going to run that on port 3000 by default. And the other one is going to be to run the site using Next.js. And that's going to be running on 8000. And while that's booting up, I'm going to introduce the first file that you want to create as part of a Keystone project, which is keystone.js. Borrow a couple of lines of code. So if you see me looking up at the side like this, it's because I'm finding the code that I want on my other screen. Now, so export. I'll put that in later. And it's almost enough to get us up and running. So basically, the keystone.ts is the entry file. When you use the Keystone CLI, it will read your config out of this. And the bare minimum that you need to really include is just how to connect to the database and some lists. Lists are what we call basically the equivalent of if you've used MongoDB, collections, if you're in a relational database world, tables. We call them lists and items instead of closely associating with tables and records. But you can think of them as pretty one-to-one. They're the entities in your schema. Speaking of which, so the other file that we want to create here is schema.ts. And I'm going to drop a simple schema into this to get us started.
As you do that, Jed, there's a question about Keystone 6. The question is, as I understand, Keystone 6 is production ready, even if it's not GA at the moment. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. Keystone 6 is production ready. We're actually using it in a couple of quite large production websites at ThinkMill. And yeah, there's a couple of APIs that we're still tweaking, but we actually just launched that website yesterday to sort of document most of it. We've still got a couple of guides left to go, but it's really just adding a few tweaks from here. And then we'll be publishing all of the same packages under the Keystone 6 namespace instead of Keystone Next. So I've just grabbed the most basic of all possible schemas off screen so that we can start building this up. This is it. So what we've got here is we're creating a list subject using Keystone's create schema function. We're just going to create a user to start with, a name, email, and password. And I'll pass that in here into my main Keystone config. Now, using a schema file here is a convention, but one of the nice things about this being just JavaScript is you can really structure this however you like. We can get to a much, you can sort of dynamically create fields using functions and config and things like that. So whatever abstractions exist in JavaScript, you can use to define your schema. Right now, we're going to keep it simple. And if, all right, that install actually worked well enough for me to run. My start script, which is API dev. And give me a second while I just stop my other servers that were running. There we go. Okay, so right off the bat, that CLI has done a couple of things. It's generated us a GraphQL file and the Prisma file. Does that look familiar, Ryan?
That looks very familiar.
Okay. I was watching your workshop before and you mentioned your preference for CUIDs, which we just switched to by default in the version we released yesterday.
Oh, did you? Nice. Yeah, do you have like do you have a preference one way or another? I mean, I guess you probably prefer them if you just switched over, but.
So one of our database nodes made this call. I'm, for the record, not one of our database nodes. I'm more of the front-end person. But it's the fact that they're collision resistant. You can use them for things like ordering as well.
Yeah.
Like they're a little bit more deterministic than a UID. And I definitely agree with you that using auto inks is not maybe the best choice for a production database most of the time.
Makes sense. Yeah. Glad to hear I'm not alone.
You're not alone. So we have this. We have this system running, and that's actually enough for me to boot up. Keystone. I've got no users in the database, that's fine. I've got no other models yet. So what we're aiming at is that blog. Let's just add a couple more things in. I'm going to bring in my models and then strip them back a bit. It's getting really close. So this code here. I also heard you say that you knew you had a syntax error before because Prettier wasn't formatting, and I've just done exactly the same thing.
Oh yeah? Yeah, it was weird because in my workshop, the code ended up running even though Prettier wasn't formatting, which I was surprised about. And it looked like it wasn't actually a syntax error, but it just wasn't running. But yeah, I see you've got a red squiggly there.
Yeah, I had a missing. There we go. All right. So I've now got a really basic set of information in here for adding posts to our blog. I'll step through what these fields here are doing in a sec, but first let's just run that Yarn API dev again. And what's happened is in the background, our Prisma schema and that GraphQL schema have both been kept up to date. So I'm going to add our first set of interesting things into the schema here, and I've imported the functions already. And I'll commit this in a moment because I know this is moving way too fast for anyone following along. I've created 2 defaulting functions. One of the first benefits, I think, of being able to really program your content schema in something like TypeScript rather than using one of the like CMSs where you're kind of restricted to configuring options and using ClickOps for it, is that we can write whatever logic we want in here. So when we create a new post, we're actually taking the title field that's been filled out, trimming it, lowercasing it, replacing it, and adding a date to get our default slug. At the same time, we're actually hiding that slug field in the create view of the admin UI and telling Prisma to mark that in the database as a unique field. We have a status field with a select. We set a simple default value for that and pick a different UI. And then we've also got a very simple defaulting function for the timestamp. Now we could have used a database function, but I wrote this one in JavaScript. What I'm going to do before we jump into the UI again here though, is introduce our first relationship. So relationships in Keystone schemas work very similarly to in Prisma schemas. You have all of the same modeling functionality available to you. What we're going to do here is create a single relationship from post back to users using the author property. And then we're going to add a corresponding relationship over here, which is authored posts. So the main difference between Keystone and Prisma here is the way we line them up using refs. I'll show you the equivalent Prisma schema in a second, but what we want to do is get the other side. So this post list key becomes the first part of our ref. And in this case, we want, because we're storing the same data in both fields, we're going to line that up by referencing the other field here. What did I break? And on this side, that's going to be a many relationship. So we can get many authored posts per user, but only one author per post. I run yarn dev again, and our Prisma schema now has the relations set up to link that data behind the scenes. It's also actually upgraded my database behind the scenes because I'm running this. What Keystone CLI is doing behind the scenes is running Prisma DB push, which is great for prototyping, less so for production. So before we go too much further, I'm going to jump in and enable this use migrations feature. Now what's going to happen is when I come in and start that dev script again, it's going to prompt me to actually create the first migration for my database and apply it. Yes, all data will be lost. That's okay. This is our initDB migration. I will apply it. So most of that heavy lifting was just offloaded to Prisma, which has been really fantastic. One of the big changes in Keystone 6 is that we've gone all in on Prisma and ditched our previous adapters for Postgres with Connects and MongoDB with Mongoose. That means we've been able to really lean in on things like the migration experience. And I can't say enough good things about Prisma Migrate. It's really, for me as kind of more of a front-end developer, it's made it feel like the same kind of ease of use that I used to get out of MongoDB and Mongoose years ago, but without any of the downsides. Like I'm still using migrations. I've still got a relational database under the hood, and that's fantastic. So we've now got a migrations folder, like you'd expect if you use that feature before. I think one of the other really nice things here is it's all kind of tied into a unified workflow. So I can come back into this admin UI, and now you can see we've got posts showing up on the left. I can create a new post. And you can see the slug field isn't showing up, and that publish date is going to get defaulted. Should probably create, I'm not going to create a user yet, actually. I'll explain that in a second. So question came in, can you mix the content database with a Prisma-driven non-Keystone app database? At the moment, Keystone will override your Prisma schema when you start it. We are planning to add a feature where you can mix in your own Prisma schema that we will respect. So the eventual strategy that will be a bit like with Prisma Migrate, where at a certain point you can stop having Keystone drive your Prisma schema and you can take responsibility for it yourself. All we would do in that scenario is just not synchronize, but confirm that the two schemas are compatible. So if Keystone expects to have a list with a corresponding type in Prisma, we check it. And if it expects fields to be there, we validate that it's there, but otherwise we'll leave it with you. What you can do as well, which we'll get to later, is mix in additional data sources into the GraphQL API. So kind of yes in two different ways. That's a great question, Zach, about Prisma's Nexus, and I'll definitely be coming back to that in a little bit later. But yes, you can actually create a corresponding schema with Nexus and then tie that into your Keystone schema as well. So now that I've got the basics of authors and posts set up, I'm going to commit that into that GitHub repo for us. And I'm going to bring in here's a Git ignore I prepared earlier. While I'm in there, I will bring in tsconfig, and that will do. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is plug in authentication, because if I go too much further without that, we're going to be missing out on being able to use sessions. So to do that, I'm going to use one of the other packages I installed called Keystone Auth. And we're going to add this into the main Keystone entry point. It looks like this. We have a create auth function that we expose. To get auth set up, we're going to need a session secret. In production, you'd absolutely want to use an environment variable, but I've given us a pre-generated one today just so that we can move past that without setting up .env. And now what I need to do is call create auth to set up my options for that. So let's unpack this. What I need to tell create auth is that there's an email field and a password field, as well as the list key to look at. So in line with not making a lot of assumptions about like really anything, we don't assume that we know what your users are. Most other CMSs will come with a preconceived notion of users or accounts. Keystone expects you to be able to create the schema for that yourself and gives you flexibility to add whatever else you want into that. When people log in, this session data fragment here is the GraphQL selection that we make against the user list. And we automatically populate that into session if they have a valid kind of user in the cookie. The other config option that I'm going to set is this init first item one, which tells Keystone the fields that we need to fill out on that first form that you saw me do at the start of the session. We're going to capture the name, email, and password in order to actually create our first user. This is really just a nice dev utility, but it's also going to populate a role for us, which brings me to the next thing that I need to add in before we actually boot this up, which is going to be roles. Now, there's a lot of flexibility, like with users. There's a bunch of different ways that you could decide to set up your authenticate, like your access control system. Really simple systems might just have an is_admin flag that you can check, or even just signing in as a user itself is enough. What I've done for this demo is actually create a separate role list that we're going to relate to users with 2 checkboxes in it for different permissions. One is managing content, the other is managing users. And we won't have any access control yet. I will pull the checkbox, type in, and I need to create the relationship between users and roles. So I'll stick that in my schema above. There we go. And so pretty much the reverse of what we had set up before with posts. We're going to have 1 role per user, many users per role. And now, if I've managed to do everything correctly, we will boot this up. It should run. Okay, we've got another migration. And while that's booting up, we can actually refresh this at any time. We have a neat little loading page that's going to ping the server to make sure it comes up. There we go. Now, I still don't have any users. The last thing I need to do to actually get it to pay any attention to the fact that I've got users and roles now is configure that auth and session back in my Keystone entry file. So 2 more additions here. The first is this UI config to tell it that I can or can't access the admin UI. And I need to configure session management. So I'll drop that in here. Stateless Sessions is one of the session strategies that we vendor with Keystone. We've got other options for using Redis, but I'm using stateless. Basically means that we take the session and we encode it, we encrypt it into basically the same pattern as a JWT, but all we're storing is the item ID and the list key that you're logged in as, and then we can load up the rest of the information from the database at the start of every request. I'm going to get into access control in a bit, but I have a file here that I'm going to drop in just so that I can get past this. So I'll step through this a bit later, but I've pre-set up some access control rules and permissions. And I just need to import that rules set from that file. What this is saying is that this is a function, takes the current session and just says, if we have a role, then they can access the admin UI. If they're logged in, but they don't have a role, then we're not going to let them in. One more cycle, and then what we should be presented with is that first user experience, because now that it's actually applying access control to the admin UI, it's going to say, "Oop, you do not have a user. Let's create one for you because there are none in the database." As soon as you have any users in or any items in that list, this screen won't show up. So it's safe to deploy to production as long as you have a user, basically. Daniel's asked, is it possible to override the built-in Auth system if you wanted to use an Auth provider or add MFA? Absolutely. Okay, that's not working. Just while I'm answering that question, I'm going to run this again with. So I have a handy reset DB flag, which is great for this stage of prototyping. And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, this is going to use Prisma to destroy that database and reinitialize it from the migrations that have been set up. And that should get me to my first user screen. So you, sorry, it is 4:45 in the morning, and I'm going to make a couple of really silly mistakes during this. I need to get that whole config and wrap it in auth.with auth. With auth is a function that basically takes your config and adds things to it, so that all of the hooks that we've set up in Keystone to let you actually implement session management and authentication get configured correctly. But it's actually a really good answer to Daniel's question. So everything that the built-in auth does is a fairly opinionated setup. And we designed this in 2 phases. In the first phase, we designed how we wanted it to work. The second phase, we designed what APIs we would need in Keystone Core to facilitate that. So it's doing quite a bit of stuff. It's actually injecting middleware into the admin UI app to catch that I have no users in the database. It's also adding another screen to the admin UI app to present me with this particular form. It's adding custom mutations to the GraphQL schema. It's adding types to the GraphQL schema and a query for the authenticated user. I think that's it. There's probably 1 or 2 other things that I'm forgetting. But basically, all of those APIs are also available to you as someone working with Keystone. So you can replace what with auth is doing. It's like an 80-line function. It's not actually that complex. You can replace it with your own custom implementation of whatever authentication means to you. In fact, we've been using this in the last month to build a product inside of Atlassian's network, where we get given the session token. We're behind all of the network infrastructure that resolves cookies and figures out who people are, what teams they're on, what projects they have access to, and that sort of thing. So we're implementing a completely kind of custom layer for auth in one of our projects as well. All right, we're back. So as expected, that first user creation script set up the user for me. It also, if we're paying attention here, additional item data was it populated the role relationship with, told it to create a new item with this name and these 2 flags. That was necessary. Otherwise, I would have created a user, but I wouldn't have had a role that would have let me log in. But now that we've done that, we can come in and we can create. So I'm kind of like at that super user level. We could create more roles or users. What I'm actually going to do is just create two quickly. Now we're going to have a content manager. And neat little thing here is I can actually create roles on the fly. So this one can manage content. Save that. And then I'm going to create one more for a user manager. There we go. So we now have 3 users with different roles, and we're ready to start actually setting up more auth and access control. So let's dig into that file that I created a bit earlier, the permissions and rules one. I've used a bunch of other systems, and I've got to say, like, we've had the same design for access control for about 2 years, and I've never found anything like it's just really hard to go back from it. Once you can express access control as functions, you can kind of do anything. So this is quite a contrived demo. What I've actually done here is set it up so that we have these 2 functions to just quickly check if you've got those 2 permissions, but then we've got some rules. So being able to access the Ui, like I said, is being signed in with a role. Reading the content list is a little bit more sophisticated. What we're going to do here is start restricting our public GraphQL API. So you only actually have one GraphQL API with Keystone. You can check it out over here. Now, if I look at all posts, I'll have to create some posts first. Let's just do that. I'll create one in this draft status. If I fetch this, I'm going to get both of them back. That's not what I want. So the thing about the API that we're generating here is it's not just intended for the content management system to be used. It's also intended for your public app to hit it. But I don't want any member of the public to be able to see all my draft posts. So we can use access control to solve for that. In the post list, I'm going to add access. And you can only read posts with this can read content list function. What that's doing is it's saying that if you can manage content, go for it. You can see whatever post you like. But if you can't manage content, if you don't have that permission set, we're going to filter this list to only posts that are in the published status. So I come back here and I'm logged in with content management permissions, so I can see posts. But if I open up a private window, grab the same query. Ah. Wait for it. I have to restart my server first. It's hot reloading of the Keystone schema is something that a lot of people have asked us for. It's a little bit tricky when it involves potentially having to run migrations. So it's something that we're still looking at. But we know it would be a significant DX improvement. And that command is hidden behind my Zoom window, and I've just done a really silly thing and rerun the one that reset the database. So we're going to have to start that setup again, unfortunately. Probably in a real world project at this point, I would set up some seed data, either using Prisma, or Keystone also has an equivalent API. Unfortunately, I haven't set it up for this project, and this is exactly why you should. I won't worry about those roles for a minute. I'll just leave them and finish going through the posts process. Now we're back. And so hitting that API as an unauthenticated user means that the results are getting filtered to only published posts, which is, it's pretty neat. It's a good start. All right, where to next? I'm not going to fill out the rest of the access control yet, because that's going to get a little bit complicated. And I feel like we could probably get a little bit more breadth on the whole workshop content here. So I think the next thing we'll do is make a progress commit. If anyone wants to play with that. And we'll switch tracks and set up some Next.js frontend so that we can load the posts in there and actually start looking at them. So because I already added the dependencies that we're going to need in my package.json, all I really need to do to get Next running, I love how simple Next is to get set up, is I'm going to drop pages folder in. Yes. I think that's all I need to do.
I know we're a ways into it, Jed, but it might be worthwhile to bump up your editor size a little bit there to get a better view.
That's not what I was expecting. Where's that at? Thank you. There we go. So easy. All right, cool. So what I want to do here is actually, I'm just going to get rid of that Times New Roman. I've got some Tailwind components prepped, so I'll drop in a Tailwind config and a post CSS config. And now I can create an underscore auth.tsx as well. And in that one, I'm gonna import Tailwind and the props I need from Next. Sport. Borrow this from. I think I might need to restart Next in order to get it to actually acknowledge post CSS and Tailwind. There we go. I'm not sure that I'd say it's looking better, but it's definitely got some styles. All right. Speaking of things I prepared earlier, I've got an entire directory full of components, which we're not going to go into because this is way out of scope for the workshop, but I did prepare a bunch of simple Tailwind components for us to actually wrap this app in and make it look not totally ridiculous. So let's just add that. Is that container? There we go. There we go. Got a topography package as well with a styled H1 in it. And now we're looking reasonably good. So I've got Tailwind and a Next homepage. I will commit that. Push it up. And now we're going to add in the query. So you've got a bunch of different options you can use when it comes to querying a GraphQL API from Next. We're not going to dive into the pros and cons of each of them too much. We're going to use Urkel for this particular demo. I find it's a really nice balance of, it's got a cache, but it's nowhere near as complex as Apollo's. And it kind of just works really neatly. But there are some other really good ones like React Query. And that was the one that was mentioned earlier in the next workshop. It was, anyway, there's one from Vercel as well. I've heard really good things about it.
Is that SWR?
SWR is the one I was thinking of, yeah.
I'm excited to try it. I haven't tried it yet.
Yeah. It's funny, we're kind of retreading a lot of the same like basic Next.js stuff now that you went through in the last one, just using GraphQL instead of calling out to Prisma directly. Which leads me right to things I need to do. One is some client-side queries, and the other is loading data in a get static props function. So for get static props, that's going to run the server. We don't even need anything as complex as Urkel to run that. So I've got a little utils package here, which just uses fetch to make the call for us. It's kind of all we need to get this homepage running. So I've dropped that utils file in, and now I can come into my index and I can start writing my GraphQL query. Just get my reference up on the screen. Well, that GQL utility is just a really simple template strings one, so that we get syntax highlighting on our GraphQL, which is quite nice. What I would do sometimes here is actually jump into the playground where we get all of the syntax highlighting and everything that we want in autocomplete. Build up my query over here, and then just copy and paste it into here. Neat little shortcut. Almost there. Now I just return that. Now I'll have an all posts prop or posts prop in my homepage, which we can render. So I'm going to need probably an unordered list. Posts. Which might be list item. And let's see if that runs. Does not run. Why is that not run? Let's have a look at the data that it's getting. There we go. Cool. We have posts coming out. There is a bit of a catch here, which is that they don't have any content. Bit of an oversight. So that's going to lead me into the next part of the walkthrough, which is our new document field. And yeah, I think I'm good to leave it there for now in terms of this homepage. So that in. That's I'm just going to call that state for. All right, so let's go back into that schema and add a little bit more to our lists that we can use to actually get the content for each post. Let me just go and find my pre-existing one. This is in a separate package. It's optional. Probably worth making the point that you can really use whatever WYSIWYG or HTML or Markdown editor you like with Keystone, but we do include this rich document editor, which is one of the things I'm most excited about with the new version. This is our take on what a content management system for design systems should look like. We do a lot of design system work at ThinkMill as well. And what we found is that anytime you're stuck with HTML, you're going to have a really bad time trying to map anything that your authors are writing to your actual front-end components. And now that we're so heavily invested in component-based front ends, it's kind of more and more of an issue. So we built the document editor on top of Slate to basically let you, in the same way that you can create your own content types in lists, create your own content types and components inside of the documents as well. So at its most simple, I'm going to throw an intro field in here that we can use to display information on the homepage. Use the document field. I think if I run that, that's actually just, I'll do one for the page content as well. I think that's actually all I need to do to start with. I need a unique key prop on that. If I reload this post, my computer thinks it should be asleep as well. Oh, no, it's just waiting for me to run a migration. Well, that's what the content field looks like when you have no options. Probably handle that toolbar a bit differently. So everything about this is opt-in, and there's a bundle of different options that we can set on here. I'm going to set a fairly restrictive set of formatting options for the intro because I just want it to be like 1 or 2 paragraphs to describe the post on the homepage. And then I'm going to get a much more permissive set of options for my content itself. That's basically going to turn on almost everything. And what's happening if we come in and check out the Prisma schema, you'll notice behind the scenes that we're actually storing this as JSON. So if you haven't used Slate before, it's a WYSIWYG-ish editor implemented in React. You can extend it with your own components. It's like it's sort of it is to editors, it's like a headless editor framework. It is to editors what a headless CMS is to, you know, old school WordPress. And so what we're going to get behind the scenes here, if we bold that text, and if we add put in a list of things, even link out to pulling out these posts and now selecting their content and intro fields. When we query that document, you'll see we're getting the structured markup behind the content that I just wrote. It all makes sense. It's sort of very, very verbose. It gives you everything you could possibly want to know about it. It's a little bit awkward to render though. Luckily, you don't really have to do this yourself. There are high-level tools available for you. So if I now want to get that rendering on the homepage, let's get that content field and add it to our query. I will turn this from a list into divs so that I can actually add more things inside of them. That's interesting. Why did that not actually come out? Oh, I put it in the draft. Let's go put that in the right place. Actually, I'll just unpublish this one and publish this one. And of course, I'm going to need to stringify that if I want to be able to display it. There we go. So the way to get this from JSON into visible content is to jump into another one of the packages that Keystone gives us, which is the document renderer. At this point, I'm going to pull another trick of here's one I prepared earlier. And in my schema directory, I'm going to start creating some folders to put some fields tools in. So the first field that I want is the content field. I'll take that out for now and keep my renderers. So what this is doing, if I just remove this stuff here. Okay, so basically, this is giving us, taking the document renderer from Keystone, as well as quite a few of the components that I created earlier in my various UI packages, We've got these headings, and we've got a divider in our layout. And we're mapping each of the different types of elements that are present in the editor to how we want to render them in the front end. So now if we come back to the index page, we can import that component from the file I just added. Grab our document renderer. And then we just need to pass it if there is actually data to pass. So now we have the actual content being rendered. So it doesn't really matter what the content authors are going to write into this field anymore. It's going to look like what they think it's going to look like. And then as front-end developers, we're going to get that, and we're going to be able to make our own choices about how to render that for this website. Maybe we've implemented dark mode. Maybe we've got a bunch of different websites with different themes that we want to render content across. And we can do all of that because our content is now truly data. But that's only the first part. Like, there's nothing that I've just shown you that you couldn't do with something like tiny MCE back in the day if you were willing to output raw HTML. Where this gets really interesting is if I start adding my own custom components into the content field. So to do that, I'm going to create a components.tsx file.
This is my favorite part. Been waiting for this.
I have so many Zoom windows covering up like the window where I'm copying and pasting code from. If I have a pause for a second and just like look strangely in that direction, it's because I'm copying and pasting code. Probably just moving Zoom windows. Let's drop that in. So into this content block here. We are going to drop some new content blocks, and we're going to tell Keystone where to go and find the views for them. So we need to import the content blocks from that file I just created. And that means we need to export some from it as well. Let's start with something really simple, like a call out. By call out, I mean like we use these in a bunch of places on our website. What I'm trying to build is this kind of thing here. It's just a block with some content, but depending on what I want to do, I'm going to be able to apply different colors to it. So some of them are going to be blue, some are going to be orange, some are going to be gray. And what I want to do is I want to let content editors actually insert that into the document field themselves. So to do that, I need to get a bunch of imports. I'm going to drop in some appearances that I've already set up for these. And I'm going to get some icons that I prepared earlier. And because this changed recently, I need to tell it to use the previous JSX pragma behavior so that we can start using Keystone's Avenue UI uses emotion. So we're going to be using the inline CSS prop for actually styling these components. Now I can start setting them up. So I need to export something called component blocks. I'm going to create one called callout. It is a component. Give that a component. And I need to set up some prop types. I'm going to give it a label. That's what we're going to get in the insert menu in the editor. And I'm going to give it some props. So the first prop, this is probably most similar to like React prop types if you've been using React for long enough. There's a few different fields that we have available. It's actually really quite straightforward to write your own as well if you dig into how any of these are implemented. But we've mirrored a lot of the basic sort of primitive field types that Keystone has, including a select, text fields, that sort of thing. But the other one that I'm going to use here is called a content field. You can think of a content field as like an embedded editor within the editor. We can pick between a block or an inline kind. We can set a placeholder for it. And then we can also tell it how to decide what formatting, dividers, links, other things that you can insert should be dealt with. In this case, I want to inherit the options from the main editor that have been configured. And now what I need to do is render a preview component for that. So to do that, I'm going to get these props in here. So this component is the one that we use to actually render the editor interface. It's going to get given the appearance, is TypeScript being really kind to me, and the content. And what we want to return is, let's just start with something really simple and say, what do we do here? We have the that is going to have to be appearance.value. Yeah. And now I can drop a CSS block on that div to format it. What is that? Choking. That might work anyway. Let's find out. In the children here, we're just going to output the content. If anyone in the chat can see what that is actually freaking out about. Would be nice.
What's the error that you're getting if you hover over it?
It's
Children. Property CSS does not exist. Is it style you're looking for?
I think it might be this. Style will probably also work. There we go. Okay. Let's restart and see what happens. I missed something because okay, I didn't actually import it here. Right. And while that's going, I'm going to drop in the other part of what is going on. Oh, I did not give it the right path. All right. So what I'm doing here is I'm telling it to apply these components in the front end. Basically, they will get included in the admin UI's Next.js build. I've also got to give Keystone's backend the same set of component blocks so that it can understand the schema for that JSON field. And now we should be able to insert. Hey, there we go. We've got an insert menu. Let's insert. Ah, come on. That's a missing import. We need to use a different JSX function. That's the trick. That's also where those other spacing properties were going to come from. So I'll jump them in. There you go. TypeScript was telling me something useful. It definitely knew something I didn't. Yeah, now that we're just in React, we're getting hot reloading. It's just schema changes that won't hot reload. So what I can do now is I can just move between other parts of the editor and this content component that I created. I can even bold things inside here. And if I wanted to change the, oops, wrong button. If I wanted to change the appearance, I can pick from any of the other options. So it's kind of giving us like a preview of what it will probably look like as determined by the front-end developer who set up this component. But it's still up to the site to decide how to ultimately display that. And in this case, that's kind of cool because the site's using Tailwind and the editor is using Emotion. And so they actually can be the same. We could get one of our components if we had a front-end design system and we could use that component to render this content instead, but we also don't have to. We can kind of create a close enough representation, which is nice when you want to start getting into hidden bits and pieces. There's a couple other really nice tools that I'm not going to go through in detail here because it's going to be too much. But one of the things we can do to make this a little bit of an even nicer experience is we can set this property called chromeless, which is going to take away the extra chrome that's been put around that field. We now get a floating toolbar. It's not, now we can't get to like that back of the card style set of options though. But one of the other things we can do is we can just create our own toolbar. So if I drop this toolbar that I created earlier into here as well on the props, I'll need a few more imports to make that work. And tooltip as well. So Keystone Ui is our admin UI design system. It's got a bunch of these helpful primitives in case you're trying to build UI that looks at home in the admin UI. You could really use anything you like that you've got handy. We could be using Material UI or Chakra or anything. What we've got now is that custom toolbar. So I can create whatever custom interfaces I want. This one is looping over those options that we set up earlier, creating a toolbar button. The toolbar is given the same props as the component renderer with an on-remove as well. So we can call props.appearance.onChange when you click on one of the other toolbar buttons, and then we can put our little trash button over here to the right. And that's how we create custom components that are designed to be used with our design system in our content management system. And the whole thing is kind of founded on this concept of a schema that you can program. Because if you start trying to do stuff like this in most other CMSs I've ever seen that you can't program, it's very hard to make this work. So we're really excited about the potential that this is unlocking for us on projects where we can actually give people much richer experiences. Now we need to get it rendering, but I'm going to just commit that here because we're at least halfway through the time. Might be nice for a quick change of pace. How's everyone going? How's the chat and questions and everything else?
Looks like we don't have any new ones in the Q&A. I'm going to just dismiss these ones because we've answered them live, these previous ones. And no other questions in the chat either. I would recommend, if you're up for it, Jed, that we take just a quick 5 before coming back to move on. What do you think?
That sounds good. Let's take 5.
So everyone could take water break, bio break, whatever, and yeah, we'll be right back. Hey, we're back. How's it going now, Jed? Did you sleep before this? I was wondering about that. Or have you been pulling an all-nighter?
No, I didn't. It's been a while since I pulled an all-nighter. I might actually still be like kind of sitting here programming when my 1-year-old wakes up.
Is that right? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but if there's anything about having a 1-year-old, it's that it's really good training for like interrupted sleep at night. So
this is true. Yeah, we have a 1.5-year-old and a 4-year-old, and the 1.5-year-old definitely challenges our sleep quite often, as it did last night. In fact, it was not a great sleep last night.
Yeah, we're in school holidays as well.
Right.
It's all it's been a big month.
Yep.
Well, yeah, I know I'm in real trouble because I just started hearing like the morning birds outside.
Oh.
Really?
Yeah.
But while we took a break, I did a little bit of just a little bit of cleanup on this, and I'm at least kind of halfway through the time, but I'm not really halfway through the material, so I'll try and pick up the pace. It's super weird not having any audience. I don't even know how many people there are in the audience. Like I would normally be kind of reading people's body language and speeding up or slowing down. It's very strange doing this over Zoom, but
Yep.
I hope you're all still with us, and I hope that this is interesting and engaging. I'll push forward with some of the other interesting stuff, and probably kind of end up doing a bit of a tour of where to find different bits and pieces that we've set up for you in this workshop, and then like leave you with the repo. We've also got a community Slack, so if anyone's interested in picking this up and having a playing with it, we're kind of at that stage where we're really keen for feedback, hearing people's thoughts, seeing where the challenges are, and kind of sanding off all the rough edges. So yeah, that's like, please come and talk to us afterwards if you feel like picking this up and having a play with it or using it. And feel free to open issues or ask questions on the repo that I shared at the top as well. Let's kick on. So what I've done is, just to keep things organized a little bit better, stick the list that I'm defining, post and user and role, into a schema directory, which means that my top level schema file is now just importing them, and it's going to help us kind of keep them a bit more organized as we go. Just to check, Zoom's not showing me which window is shared. It's the Keystone code editor is actually the one that I've shared, right?
Yep. Yeah, I got your code editor.
Excellent, cool. All right. So I was showing you before the break the custom components. I'm actually going to show you another one that's a little bit fancier, and this is going to start with creating another list. We're going to make it so that our authors can not just insert these fancy callouts, but we're going to make it so that they can actually create polls and embed them in the blog posts. And to do this, I'm going to need some data. So I've actually got a complete poll schema here that I'm going to drop in. I'm going to rip out a couple of the access control things that I had set up. We'll hopefully get a chance to come back to that a bit more. And I don't need that. I actually do need that is signed in for that bit. I'll take it from there. Let's just get these. Okay. So what I've done is I've dropped in 2 new lists, polls and poll answers. Polls themselves have a label and just a relationship with the answers. We're using a lot more UI configuration here to make the content management interface nicer for people to use. We're using our cars display mode. I'll show you that in a sec. And we've also got this poll answer schema with very simple, just a label, the relationship back to the poll and the users who have actually answered, given that answer. We're going to have to run another migration. Or are we? Nope, we're not going to need to run another migration. I'm going to need to import those lists, and then we're going to need to run another migration. I'll do this one first, and then I'll get some autocomplete going.
Not sure if you saw the question about Firebase Auth there, Jed, in the Q&A.
I didn't see that. There isn't. It is, so around that Auth, a whole bunch of stuff that we want to add. Firebase would be a really good one. Also SSO for things like GitHub, Facebook, Twitter, all the usual suspects are on our roadmap to build into that Auth package. If anyone actually gets enthusiastic and decides to build their own Firebase Auth though, I would love to hear from you. And happy to give you some hints and tips and point you in the right direction in our Slack as well. Okay, so the error that I got was that poll answers are referencing a field on users, but I did not go and add that field to users. So I'll just do that now. What did we call it? We called it poll answers. I'll just pull that off my previously existing one, I think. So something we're doing here in poll answers with users is saying that we're not going to show it on the create screen. It links to many. Sorry, we're not going to be able to create poll answers directly. And when we create users, we're not going to prompt them to enter poll answers because that wouldn't make any sense to someone managing users. One more time, and we should get a migration now. So part of the design of this CLI is so that it will actually, and Keystone generally is so that it will fit into your normal Git-based workflow. As opposed to having some third party have their own concept of like a staging instance and a production instance and how to deal with that. The whole idea is like Prisma, this just really fits into your current workflow. You commit most of the assets into Git. The post install step that we've got will validate that your schema is in sync and that everything else is lined up correctly and generate types so that it all passes CI. You can have it error CI if anything is out of sync. And then you would deploy it using the, we actually also expose Prisma CI. So your general build step would be something along the lines of Keystone next Prisma, migrate, deploy, and Keystone next build. And you'd put that in the build step of any service like Heroku or Railway or the new app platform that DigitalOcean just came out with. So this actually kind of means that you can get continuous deployment with your backend in the same way you do with your front end. And now we've got polls and poll answers coming out. So let's just drop a poll in. What's your favorite ORM? Create that poll. Eek. Something wrong. But what? That's a really strange error. I'm going to roll this back until that doesn't actually appear, because that's really not what I was expecting to see. Let's try rolling these back. Relationship and text. That's my polls, and that's my users. They have the poll answers. Ah. Okay, that's good. Except that I don't know why it happened. Just drop that back in. I hope this works, because I'd love to show you the cards UI here. Hold on a second. It's always a bit risky when you're copying and pasting code from one repo into another and trying to pretend that you're doing it piece by piece.
Yeah, that's very true. It's hard to get exactly the happy path during a workshop.
That's not. Oh, yeah, I know what's going wrong. We don't have a vote count yet. Yeah, that's exactly what went wrong. That's interesting. All right, I'm going to try and make sure that we can throw a better error when that happens. I really feel like it should be able to point me in the right direction there. So what I was leaving off so that I can come back to it next was some of the ways that we're going to extend this schema to make polls work. But we're going to add virtual fields to calculate how many votes a poll has and things like that. So now we're in here. Okay, very good. I can create some answers. This inline relationship management thing is new with version 6, and it makes it a lot faster and nicer to manage related data. So we could say Prisma. Prisma could be your favorite ORM. Maybe Mongoose could be. I guess connects. I've heard things about something called type ORM. Let's save that. So we've just created a poll, created a bunch of poll answers. And now what we're going to do is make it possible to insert that into the content field. If I come back into my posts over here, the next step is to create a new component. So what's changed here? This is where I want to be. Okay, so next to this callout component, we're going to create another one called poll. And I'm going to grab the one that I coded up earlier, so you don't, trust me, you do not want to watch me try and type this from scratch. It's not very different from the other one. We have a rendering component, and we have a label and some props. The key difference is this new relationship field that I'm using. So I'm using a single relationship. This is one, giving it a relationship label. And I need to actually also define a relationship in the schema that this can refer to. So to do that, I'm going to come back to the content schema over here and my content block. And I'm going to drop a relationships in here. So this relationship poll is the key that has to match this one here. I give it the list key of things that I want to select from. I tell it that this kind is it's a prop. And I can also give it this selection. So like what we looked at in the start when we were hydrating session, this is also a GraphQL fragment, effectively. It's technically a GraphQL selection of fields. And this is the set of data that we're going to get automatically loaded for us about the related items. So I need to learn from my mistakes before I take vote count out, because that's not really there. And also the user answer, that's not there yet either. But I do have ID, label, and answers with ID and label, so I can select those. And then given that data, in my preview component, I'm going to output the label. That is, of course, editable. No, it's not editable. That belongs to a completely different object. And then I'm going to display a list of the answers. Let's see if that works. I'm going to have to cycle the API because I made schema changes. It's just about content in JSON field though, so it won't generate a migration for me. Now, yeah, that's what I was expecting to say. So it's just letting me know that those component blocks are being provided, but they're not in the server-side field config. And that is more up to scratch with the quality of error messages that I expect. All right, let's see if it works. Rats. I did not make sufficient offerings to the demo god before this workshop. No poll selected. Okay, I've got it. I know what's going on there. I have this text here, and I need to tell Slate that that is not editable. Because if I try and move my cursor into there, Slate's going to try and figure out what node it should be editing, and there isn't one. that corresponds to that text. So you can put whatever content you want into these components, but if it's not corresponding to a child prop, then you need to wrap it in not editable, or it will freak out. Cool. What's your favorite ORM? Done. And there's my answers. I'm just going to imagine in my head that you're all like, yeah, woo, that's amazing. Because I can't see you, so I'll pretend. Anyway, cool. We have a poll, and if I select this content again, what we will see is that down here we have a poll. Right, it's got a poll ID. It's not giving us any data. I need to tell it to hydrate relationships. This is an optional step. It's a little bit of extra work that the API is going to do. So if you want to use a different selection set, you can always just get that data, run your own GraphQL queries once you've actually loaded the contents of the document field, and do whatever you want. But in this case, I'm actually happy with what it's giving us. So there's all of that related data coming through. And Ryan, do you know any other CRMs?
Well, what have you got? CRMs or ORMs?
ORMs, rather.
ORMs. Yeah, I guess. I mean, what's the one that I was just thinking of earlier? I'm blanking on the name. The other one that's really popular with TypeScript. Do you have that type ORM?
Oh,
do you have that? Oh, you already had that.
The other one.
The other one. Yeah. What else? Sequelize, is that one?
Oh yeah, Sequelize. We can check that one in. This set of IDs, by the way, I'm just missing config on that. Tell it what to display for the relationships. Sequelize. So if I jump back into this post, I just wanted to make the point that this data is absolutely live. I missed out on Sequelize because I did not actually save it. But if I was to actually save it and then come back into my post, every time this content gets loaded, we're getting the update to data from the database. It's not like just fetching the data and then embedding it in the content. So that's cool if you're using data from the database. You can see none of them have any answers. We should probably just update that, say 0 answers. There we go. But if I want some content that's derived, like business logic, then I can do that too. And if I jump back into my polls models for a minute, I'm going to just throw a few more tricks in here. And one of them is that for each of the answers, I want to actually get a vote count, because at the moment, if I look into the API here, I could actually select who's voted for each of these answers. And I don't think that we should be giving away an association between a user ID and a vote for an answer. That should be private. So what I'm going to do...
Sorry, Jed, I do have to run, so I'm going to make you host, and you're flying solo now. Sorry, I've got to run before you finish out, but all the best on finishing it out, and I'll sync up with you after.
Right, cool. Thanks, Ryan.
All right, thanks.
So, I'll move as quickly as I can through this next part. I'm going to drop a vote count virtual field into the poll answer. I need to import my virtual field for that. And I also need to get our schema so that I can define it. So let's have a quick look at that. Oh wait, we also generate TypeScript information here. So we can actually get a really nicely typed API, very similar to Prisma's. What I'm doing is saying that this is an integer field in the schema, and in order to resolve it, we get the lists API, very similar to Keystone's API, sorry, to Prisma's API, and we're going to count all the users that have a poll answer linked. Next thing I'm going to do is add some virtual fields into the polls themselves. I want to know two things about these. One of them is the count of how many responses the poll has had overall. And the last thing is, if there's a current user logged in, what was their answer so that we can display that in the front end. So that looks like this. Two more imports. We want to check that they're signed in. So another cycle of the server, and we should be able to pull that data out as well for each poll. And that will let us add it to the schema here. So for each answer, I'm going to get the, I think it's, I call it vote count. And there we go. I'll just grab the responses count here as well. And that's one of the ways that we can extend the Keystone schema using those virtual methods. What I'm going to do at this point, because it's getting quite late, is I'm going to commit all this into this repo. And I'm going to switch over to my main repo again and just kind of use the last last time that we've got here in the workshop to try and step you through how the concepts that I've laid out come together in a more sophisticated version of this app. Next thing that I want to walk you through is access control. So let me just get rid of this for a second and bring this one back in into view. I am going to start this server. Oops. How do I? I closed the VS Code terminal without actually killing the process. Now I don't know how to get it back again. I can use activity mode to solve this. No, I can't. That's weak. Does anyone on the call know how to kill background processes that I can't find anymore? Oh wait, this might be under a different. No. Sorry, I've just worked that out. I needed to start up the API steps first. That connection refused wasn't because the port was in use, it was because in the build process for next, it was hitting the, it's actually hitting the API server to load static paths and not getting the response that it needs. There we go. Okay. All right, I'm going to do my trick of resetting the database again. And just so that I don't make the same mistake as before, I'm going to start it without the flag. And now we should be able to get back into something that actually works. Hopefully the last time I have to do this in front of you tonight. All right, let's take a step through some of the other stuff that we can do. So I just showed you virtual fields, and I've created another one to show off just how powerful they can be in this fully fleshed out version of the app, where what we can do here is type in a GitHub username like mine. And when we save changes, have it pull out all the GitHub repos that are linked to that. This is the answer to a question that got asked right at the start of the session, which is, how do you extend the schema? And does this play nice with things like using Prisma and Nexus together? So the way this is implemented, save that, is in our users schema. I've created a virtual field for GitHub repos here, and I've done two things. We've written a resolver for that that actually goes and hits the GitHub public API based on the GitHub username in the item. If there's not one set, it's going to return an empty array, but if it is, it's going to call GitHub's REST API, load the JSON, filter out any private or fork repos, sort them by how many stars they've got, and then return them. And it's returning them into this custom schema. We've used Keystone's schema generator, but you could also use Nexus or any other type of schema generator that you wanted here for this. Because of that, we get all of this data back. And if I come in here and select all users, GitHub repos, then I get a whole lot of different stuff. Straight out of GitHub's API. And I can do so in a way that is effectively related back into content that I've got local to Keystone. The second thing I've done here is take advantage of the same hook that we were using to put custom components into the content editor. We're using custom views here to provide a field component. This is coming out as JSON from the API, but I've created a custom React component that gets these repos, displays the first 10, and then displays how many more there are. Without that, if I was to actually comment that out, what you would see here is just the rendered JSON that it's bringing back. And this is a much nicer interface for any of our users. So hopefully I've given you a pretty good sense of the ways, like sort of, I guess the approach we've taken to building a really extensible system here that gives you a lot of stuff to get going out of the box, but then lets you kind of start adding your own stuff in over time to make basically implementing your own custom application that you can kind of grow out of the constraints of the things that we've built. The next major, I think one of the major things that we haven't covered yet is access control at scale. And so I won't step you through all of the details. If you're interested in picking this up and using it, this repo is a really good reference of all the things you can, like how to implement a whole bunch of different patterns. What I'll do instead is just sort of show you how it looks when it's set up. So one last time, I'm going to create a couple of new users. I'll just create a content manager. Oops, thanks, hot reload. And I'll set up that role that can only manage content. This time though, I'm actually going to sign in as the content manager. And what you see here immediately is that I can't see half the fields anymore. What these rules are doing is changing the field modes so that if it's me, I can edit them, but otherwise I can only read them. And that's a UI property that we can set, and it corresponds to access control that does the same thing. You can actually only update yourself or users if you're a user manager. We're also doing some things like hiding the create and delete buttons from the UI if you don't have permission to manage users. I also can't see roles at all anymore on the left because roles are set to being completely hidden. And we've got the full Keystone context with the Prisma client, the Keystone APIs, and the session in here to make decisions with. If I come into Content Manager, these fields are editable, but if I come into not the user that I'm logged in at, I just see a summary of the data. I can't actually change anything, and it doesn't even look like I can change anything. I can, however, write content. If I was to log in with that other role, so sign out, sign back in again as I'll just go and update that role to not to be a manage users. That's going to be faster. Now I can log in and manage users. I can see all the fields. I can see the roles. But if I come to posts, I can't create them. I should have created a post first. It would have been more interesting. But at this point, you probably get the idea of how this is actually set up and what it's capable of doing. So that's access control and the ability to integrate it into the way that UI is sort of responding to the permissions I've got. The last thing I'm going to show you, just to wrap this up, is that I've spent a lot of time around the schema and the API and the admin UI, but let's have a look at the front end now. I'll quickly create a post. Also, hopefully the last time I have to do this tonight. Publish it, pick an author. Okay. Now that's showing up on my homepage, but in this version of the front end, I've got a blog page to go to. That's done in Next, very idiomatic Next. We've got, oops, that. Get static paths is querying all of the posts in the system. And then get static props for each path is going to get the data about that post and put it into the page props for us. If I drop one more poll in though, there's only one choice at this conference, isn't there? I'll leave it at that. Now I can come back into this post, insert my poll. This is not the code base where I had found that bug and fixed it. Or so I thought. Why is that not working? Wish I'd been able to spend a little bit more time with this before crashing and burning in a demo. How do I get past this? I'm going to have to leave that one for today. But if you can imagine with me for a second, I have a poll renderer here for the front end so that the users can actually select an option. And the way we want to wire that up from the front end is going to need a little bit of, well, basically what we want to do there is add a custom mutation. So this is where you start expanding past what that CRUD API is going to give you. And what we've done is create a vote for poll mutation that exists on the schema as well, which takes the current session, as long as you're signed in, checks to make sure that you don't currently have an answer, and then creates one so that it checks to make sure there is an answer, and it links it to your current user. In order to do that, we actually need to be able to sign in to the front end as well. So the same APIs that we're using in the admin UI are available to you to call from the front end as well. So I can sign out here. There we go. Or I can sign in. Oops, that's not the right email. What was it? Admin at Keystone. Well, let's pretend I don't have one. I can also join. I can create a new account. Now I'm signed in as that new user. And if I was to come back to the admin UI, of course, that user doesn't have a role, so I don't have any access to it. I can sign out, I can sign in again. Now I'm signed back in as myself. And I can use the admin UI again. And all of this in this particular app is implemented through the Auth component that I've set up. So basically this wraps Keystone's Auth APIs. And then that means that around the entire app indexed, we can wrap it with our Auth provider. And on pages like the homepage, we can check to make sure it's ready, access the session data, and either tell the user that they're signed in or present them with some links. And on the sign in page, we can use the same use Auth hook to call the signing mutation and respond to changes in the front end. So that's a bit of a wrap of like the scope of functionality that we've been working on for Keystone and how it's designed to let you build like simple apps, but that turn into complex apps. I'm going to wrap it up here because we've been doing this for a while and it's coming on nearly 7 in Australia in the morning. But if anyone's got any other questions, I'm happy to like kind of hang out and answer for a little bit. Otherwise, love it if you could check it out. Let us know what you think. Maybe even star our repo, keystonejs.com. We got any questions for me? You're going to have to unpack those abbreviations for me. The SAML or WS Fed for enterprise. Sure. So single sign-on would look like one of those custom Auth integrations that I was talking about. I don't have any sample code in this repo to show you, but it's one of the examples that we'll be adding soon to, I'll show you this instead. We have a growing collection of examples in our GitHub repo. And the goal is to end up with quite an exhaustive set of the different things that you can do. And GitHub Auth is one that we have a prototype of. That's not quite SSO, but it's the same principles. What you would want to do is have something else sitting in front of the service that Keystone's running, pulling probably headers off the request, and then telling the Keystone session how to recognize that. So you could implement the entire population of that session yourself if you wanted to. The way it's implemented in the Auth package is to look up an item in the database, the way we've been implementing it for Atlassian is effectively like single sign-on. They have their own infrastructure for determining who a user is and what permissions they've got. We then associate that directly with data in the database and hydrate that session using a custom function. Does that answer the question? It's not something that comes out of the box at the moment, but it's not. It's definitely quite possible to build. All right, well, we're down to, looks like there's just 7 of us left. So thanks so much for hanging out with me. It's been a pleasure to take you on a walkthrough. We'll leave it there and enjoy the rest of Prisma Day.